All right, well, good evening, everybody. We're gonna get started. It's about 6:35, so people come in, they can certainly join us. So thank you for coming out and joining our first community conversation that we're calling Primary Priorities. Thank you, Nicole, for the title. I love it. And our goal is to go around and have a series of community conversations around the district. So if my clicker works here, all right. So tonight we're going to have four main parts of our agenda. We're going to start with an overview of the school, with some descriptive information. Then we'll have an opportunity to talk about some of the challenges that our facilities face here at the school. An opportunity to listen to folks who are here. The real goal of this is the dialogue piece, so number 3 is really important to us. And then, of course, just closing the meeting tonight. So just to frame this, our goal tonight is to educate folks, to come together and have some discussion about our building, about the needs of the actual physical school itself. This isn't a debate. We're not here to solve problems tonight, but really to come together as a learning community so that we understand some of the challenges that we face. So tonight, our team of presenters will be myself, Dr. Gosselin, Superintendent of Schools, if I haven't met you all. We have Don O'Leary, our Director of Facilities. He'll be leading the bulk of the evening tonight. And then, of course, Emily Judd, our amazing principal here at WPS, will also be here to answer questions and offer insights as well. So just to get a sense of who is here, I'm just going to ask you, if you're a parent here at Washington, can you raise your hand? If you're a teacher here at the school. All right, so a couple double dippers, yeah, all right, employee of the school. A parent at the other schools, but a community member that doesn't have a student in the school.
That's why I don't come to these meetings.
All right. How about school board members? All right, so we got a number of school board members as well. So thank you. That's kind of just a sense of who's in the space tonight. And then our goal is to, like I said, come together as that community of learners and have a discussion. So here's some facts about Washington Primary. Maybe. I think this is batteries on in my last life. So WPS has a school population of 101 students. It's our largest elementary school in the district. And we also have our REACH program here, which is our pre-K program that services 39 students daily. Our school is very proud of our academic performance. We have scores that consistently exceed state norms. So we do a great job of educating students here. The school is large. It's 43,000 square feet of instructional space. It's actually larger than that, but the instructional space is 43,000 square feet. And that doesn't include the central office. We kind of think of that as a separate bucket. We're in a very large site here. We have over 30 acres that is bounded on two sides by the Chippewa River. The building was constructed in 1941. In 1990, a major renovation was completed at the school that largely focused on updating the mechanical systems. Since then, we've done some other recent projects. We replaced the roof of the gymnasium in 2010. We converted the building from a steam heating system to a hot water heating system back in 2014. In 2019, we did a project to replace insulation. And then in 2021, we installed a 5,000-gallon fuel tank here at the school. The school, utility-wise, our water comes from a well that has a well pump, as probably most of your homes do. Our power comes from Connecticut Light and Power, largely getting to us through overhead power lines and then underground to the building. Our storm water is collected from the roof and then it goes into dry wells. And then our paved surfaces outside have catch basins that then discharge either to a dry well or to some spots where it runs off onto surface. And then our sanitary waste is discharged to a septic tank, and then that wastewater is dispersed outside through a leaching field. So I'm going to invite Dawn up to talk about some of the concerns about the facility itself. we shared with you as clip notes so that you can follow along as Dawn talks about some of these. And the areas that are blue underlines are exactly what you would think. They're links. And so as Dawn gets to those, I'll open up some pictures just so that you have a chance to see and really wrap your mind and your arms around some of the things that we're talking about. One of the things that I think our maintenance department does exceptionally well here is to keep our school looking and feeling beautiful, right? And most parents come in and they look around and say, wow, this school looks really great. It's clean, it's colorful, the teachers have beautiful classrooms. So a lot of work goes into making sure that the school looks great. And so some of the things we're talking about are gonna be the things that you don't necessarily see that kind of lie beneath the surface, right? And we've done a lot of work to try to keep our school up to snuff and continue to maintain things and fix things as they break and make easy to make improvements. And we've, I would say, probably picked most of that low-hanging fruit. And so what we're here to share with you so that everyone's on the same page as a community is, here's some of the big items now that we have to take a look at the school. So I'm gonna let Mr. O'Leary talk about some of these, and then we'll have an opportunity for folks to engage in conversation.
Hello. First, let's say the schools are safe. We've done a lot. We've locked them down. We've made them weather tight. We've repaired the windows and the roofs, and we put in card readers and things like that to make improvements. We've locked the environment out, and now what's driving this is that we're at the edge of having to make big decisions about repairing big components. The heart of the building, the heating and lack of air conditioning system in the building was last put in 1990. A number of those pieces are failing. The boilers and the burners. We'll show those pictures. Now, you'll see in many of these pictures that although the equipment is old, we've made many repairs and replacements and trying to keep it running. But in this particular instance, it's old and it's in need of replacement, I'm sorry. You'll see, you could leave that one there.
Yep.
You'll see this particular school was steam right up till a few years ago. And we converted it to hot water. Steam running through these pipes in this school is very invasive, and it broke down the internal linings of the pipes quite a bit. If you go underneath the school, you'll find that there's there had been a lot of leaks, which we have repaired. What happened here is when we changed from steam to hot water, we had to replace circulators and various other things. But this is just in the boiler room. The rest of the school has remnants of WPS right here. Yes, these are more boiler pictures from the front. Has remnants of pieces of equipment that are in need of repair and replacement. The burners on these two pieces of equipment are 1990 age, and when I got here, they were in a bad shape. Right now, they're running pretty reliable. And but they have a lifespan too. You know, at some point we're going to be replaced or needing to replace that. That's why we're here to talk about these things. I'm sorry, I'm not the greatest at this, but I'll get you through. So all of our schools have hot water and heating circulators and hot water burners, and this is the 180-gallon burner up in the boiler room that services the entire school for its hot water needs. And that's probably the fourth water heater I've put in since I've been here in 15 years.
Don, that looks like the one that I have in my house. So is this commercial grade or is this like a residential one? Is this larger than I'd have in my house?
It's an 80-gallon unit. It's a residential unit. It's got a circulator right here that constantly circulates the hot water, which is very energy inefficient. It circulates that hot water through loops to go through various restrooms so that when people do turn the water on, it at least is there. Imagine how far that is from reach. You know, so if it weren't circulating, it'd be pretty cold for quite a long time if we were down there. Many of the pneumatic valves building. So these are various pneumatic valves that you'll find located throughout the building. And what I mean by that is they're air operated. We keep a compressor down underneath the school constantly running to provide air pressure for these valves. Another very inefficient piece of equipment. We've replaced that compressor 2 times now in the 15 years I've been here. We'll show our circulators. Our circulator pumps in this particular instance have been replaced back when we changed it from steam to hot water. This is one of the valves in the boiler room. These are the reasons we need to make some big changes here. These pieces are all inefficient and they're in need of replacement even now, even after they had been changed, within the last 10 years. And basically, they were just conversions from steam to hot water. Remember I said that steam creates a violent atmosphere inside the pipe that breaks it down from inside. Okay, so our schools there's a number of, let's start by saying this. Our boiler room pumps out hot water to various areas through radiators and distribution boxes. This particular distribution box is feeding the cafeteria and reach area and the teacher's work zone. Now, this is just its insulation to protect its ductwork. It is fiberglass, so it is not hazardous. It's got filters on that we change twice a year in the spring and the fall. It's as clean as we can get it, but notice it's all driven by motor, by shiv, by bearing, and fan. It's outdated. We can show the bearings that run the fans. Now, we constantly maintain these pieces of equipment. The problem is they're at the end of use. They start to need to be replaced. This is a bearing on a fan, a large blower unit that's about this big. It's constantly moving as long as the but the heating is running in this building. There are various wall-mounted. Well, let's start here. In the office area, there's a rooftop unit that the best I can see was put in the late 80s. So this unit provides cooling for the front office space and heating also. We keep these units up and running and we maintain them as best we can, but they're old. They start to need to be replaced at some point. We have incoming air louvers that, I don't know how many of you have been out and watched baseball games behind the building, but that's the incoming air louver for the gymnasium, the front office space, everything from the Emily's office downward. On the inside of here, there's a set of louvers down below and a set of filter banks where the incoming air gets mixed with the air inside this building and then pushed back through our ductwork. We could bring us to our water systems. Our water system piping is in need of replacement from copper and lead solder joints to composite materials. So later in here, you'll see that the EPA has issued that no lead is acceptable in a public water supply. One of the ways that lead gets into public water supplies is through water system. Yeah. Is through the solder. Oh, I did that. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay, it's okay.
I get nervous. I touched them as the thing and it goes through. So our water system is moved through copper pipes in this building that have lead solder joints. Now we are far within any state or EPA limits. However, the goal here is to remove these hazards from our schools entirely. And to do that, these pipes run through this entire school. And they're all in very similar, oh gosh,
Don't worry about
He's
it.
doing
It'll be
Uh,
fine.
He's like, I just looked at it this time.
No, okay, so underneath this particular building, there are a number of sumps. When I got here, 15 years ago, there was a lake behind this building. It was very interesting. They were playing baseball and there was a large lake and there was a ramp going down into the lower level downstairs and they had large landscape piping, corrugated piping running out, and they had pumps downstairs because the water kept coming into the basement. They kept pumping it out and it kept coming back in. So this is one of the remnants of that system. We have since changed what I just described. We closed off the ramp downstairs. We ran 1,300 feet of pipe to the river on that side, 1,600 on this side, and we tied a number of all these drains to the rivers. So the building for the last, that was in 2013. So for the last 10 years, it's been dry downstairs. But they lived with that here for a long time. You know, this building was built back in a long time ago. So those are our sump pumps. Our elevators are where, well, our elevators are safe, let's say that. All of our equipment is safe. However, it's old, it's very old. And what you're seeing is it's run by relay. And the relays fail on occasion and people get stuck in the car here and there. Luckily here, it hasn't happened here. It happened over at Burnham a couple times. But the repair to this was $65,000 to remove the relays and convert it to a digital system. The seal below this elevator, which I didn't take a picture, is another $4,000, and every 15 years or so you've got to replace it. These elevators, interestingly enough, there's 3 of them, one in each of the schools, each having a different name. This one is a Murray elevator. You ever hear? Or Montgomery. One of the others is a Murray. You ever hear of that one? Yeah, well, try finding parts for it. By the way, the state of Connecticut has inspectors that come through here annually, and we keep these things up. But what I'm trying to say is that they're wearing out. It's time that we started to look at replacing them. Where am I? Okay. We have wastewater systems in our building, and wastewater systems are connected to our toilets and our sinks and things that bring our waste outside. This particular building has actually 2 septic systems, one out here and one out in the Reach playground. Those are tanks that go to leach fields. There's a number of pipes underneath this building because the building was built in pieces and repaired and renovated in pieces through the years. These things are crisscrossing themselves all over the place. This one is right below us, right behind that wall right there. And what it appears as though they had a major issue here at one time, far before my time. But this is floor level here. So all this has been dug out. This is the foundation here, and this is going outside. So something here failed terribly. And this is just one corner. And if I were to add up how much, there's probably a couple of 1,000 feet of these septic pipes or these sewer line pipes underneath this building crisscrossing each other in different ways.
Don, can I ask, sorry,
Yeah.
this was the failed system before, are we still using any part of this?
Well, this is all in use, yes, right. It's all been repaired to the point where it's being used, right.
Okay.
This predated me, whatever
Mhm.
that was. And many of the pipes down there had been repaired predating me. If you look into the systems right here, blow that one up and I won't touch it again. So this is one of the longer runs, and notice it doing that.
Is that in the crawl space?
Yes, that is in the crawl space below this school.
And that's the one that's being held up by the cement block.
No, another one is. This particular one is being held up by these rods that are spaced every 8 or so feet. However, one of the issues with this type of a system, we've been trying to change this school over to low flow toilets. And every time we put a low flow toilet in here, we can't get it to flush enough water to push its waste out. And one of the reasons is because there's very little pitch if you see here. In some of these areas, it's level. You know, there's not enough water to go and push all that out. And in the schools, no matter how hard we try, things get pushed down the toilet that aren't supposed to be there. And they end up to get clogged. I was going to run a camera through this one at some point to see what the 6-inch has
Right.
narrowed down to. I'm not quite sure, and I'm almost afraid to do that. Hit the cast, the word cast there, and so I'll show you some more of that because it, like I said, there's thousands of feet of it. This is what it's one of the views of downstairs under the crawl space. Previous repairs and people that have been there before us have left all of this stuff down there. But you can see this is a totally different pipe, cast iron sewage pipe, and look at its condition. You know, at the moment, there's no existing leaks, but I don't know how long that's gonna last. You know, let's go
Do
on
you have
to
a
the
picture of the baby
iron.
swimming pool?
I'm sorry?
Do you have a picture
It
of
would
the
be
baby
a
swimming pool
very
in there?
big pool of something you wouldn't want to swim in. Yes, right. These are pictures of various devices are up above you, a toilet and sinks and things like that. But the condition of excuse me, the condition of the piping is to the point where we really should take a look at it to take advantage of newer toilets and less potential breakdowns. I often have, in this particular school, I'm gonna throw, I probably have a routing company up here maybe 4 to 6 times a year to unclog some of these lines because of their low pitch, their long runs, and whatever got stuck in there.
So is that problematic here? Like I see lots of fittings and bends and a fern coat thing stuck on there, so like, is it hard to get the snakes through and around those things?
Oh, yeah. One of the, yes, the answer to your question is yes. There's very few companies that are interested in coming under here, and now this crawl space is probably be about, how high, Ben? Maybe, yeah?
Yeah, 3.5, 4 feet.
To get to that clean out right there and open it and run a snake through it. So typically what we do is try to pull a toilet from up above and go down that way. But luckily, we've been able to clear all of our problems by doing that, and I messed it up really big, didn't I? Okay. 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 And this one is in the cellar down. What I'm trying to show here is the various types, the various runs, and the various locations. This one is down in the cellar downstairs. However, notice it goes through a concrete wall, and it goes through a concrete wall over there. I can't tell you what the condition of it is beyond that wall. That wall is below the staircase here, and until it comes out about 30 feet beyond, I couldn't tell you what it looks like. And it's been encased in concrete, and I suspect it's probably eaten it away
I was gonna say,
somewhat.
yeah,
The
right.
concrete's probably serving as a pipe at this point.
The line each way that,
Right. Let's see, okay, so my statement there was some are exposed, some are buried in soil, some are buried in concrete. Some are pretty big, that's a 6-inch pipe, and notice how level it is, you know? How much, it's got no pitch. To be honest with you, that's one of the problems throughout the entire district, whether it be this school or even SVS. SVS, we're experiencing a problem that is very much the same.
and we know the old adage of, you know, what rolls downhill, right? But like, we don't really have a whole lot of.
There's not a lot of hill there. No,
then-
no, sir.
This is plastic sheeting. We're not entirely
Yeah.
sure why, but there is tons and tons of plastic sheeting all over
Right.
this area. I don't know what they're covering up and what the intended purpose was. Maybe to catch leaking water. We're not sure.
Below that is just dirt. It's just dry dirt at the moment. It may have been wet at one point. But when I came here 15 years ago, this is what I found. And like Mark says, I don't know what it was put there for. I really don't. So, in this particular school, like I said, there are 2 septic systems, 2 separate tanks. This particular one is out in our soccer field outside.
Yeah.
Right, and I suspect those of you who have kids here probably play that. Well, it's not dangerous, other than the concrete if you fall and hit your arm and break your arm or something. But notice this group of trees right here. So that group of oaks, and if you look out in the daytime, you'll see them. They stick out like a sore thumb. Notice the remaining trees all around the property. They're all the same age. This particular group of trees is right below our leach field.
Oh my
They're
word.
very well fertilized.
So they've been fertilized very well.
I'm just gonna tell the kids that. That's funny. Don't catch the
And
They all live
they're
in North
pretty
here.
big too.
Wow, that's interesting.
So this particular one is in the new pavement outside the cafeteria. This is the tank, and I suspect, and I don't have any prints to show this, but I suspect its leach field is under the sycamore.
Oh,
yeah.
It's the best I could come up with.
yeah?
Yeah, I have no drawings to show it, and luckily I haven't had to dig it up. I have had to dig this one up that was feeding those 4 oaks, and we did change it, but it's still only 10 or 15 feet away from the oaks. Okay, so what you're looking at here is many of the roof. This particular school, and it's the same in the our elementary schools. We have a lack of incoming air in our schools here. The only way that we get fresh air into our classrooms is there are a number of exhaust units up on the roof that are tied to ductwork that runs through the classroom behind the walls. And in each of the classrooms, you'll find, and this
I don't think there's
particular one doesn't even
Yeah,
have one.
I was gonna say, I
Because
don't
this
think
was
there's one in
this was
here.
an add-on
Yeah.
at some later date. But in the rest of the classrooms, you'll find a register up on the wall. And basically, what that's doing is it's pulling air constantly through the small fan up on or by the fan up on the roof. But the only way it gets fresh air is by opening the window or pulling air through the doorway that the hallway may have some air. But that's the way our classrooms get fresh
Yeah, I
air.
think COVID was one of those areas where all of a sudden airflow became really important to us, right? We knew that we were supposed to have 3 fresh air changes an hour. Some industry standards might say as high as 5. And so being able to adequately move air is important. Now we do have window units, which again is really not, the best solution for the type of, commercial space that a school would be. But, that's one way that we do try to at least create some comfort in the school. And they do an okay job, but again, it doesn't really remove the amount of moisture and things that we would see in a building of this size.
Doesn't do a good job of filtering it. And I don't know how many of you know this, but they've only been in this particular school for about 3 or so years.
Well, we don't.
Right.
And this room only about
I'm sorry.
2 months ago.
I'm sorry, Brad. They're
He
here.
had other things. He had other things to do.
The problem with this, though, is that there are a number of rooms in the school that don't have it at all. Many of the sped areas, let's see,
The nurses room.
the nurses' room do not have
Yeah.
air conditioners at all.
Yeah, and we had
Music room,
Intervention.
intervention
Yeah.
rooms.
And, we're not proud of it, but we had an intervention teacher last year pass out because of the lack of airflow and the heat in that room. And we had to have the ambulance come and, treat her at the scene. So, these are real concerns that affect us in real time.
Right. Yes, right. Okay, the electrics in the school. I'm not showing the main unit here because the main unit was changed in 1990, and it is of sufficient size and quality to last some time forward. It's not in need of replacement. However, a number of the classrooms, as you can see in this particular one, like this one here, lack electrical outlet distribution in the locations that they need them. And then quite often, some of the older units that I find evidence of arcing and stuff like that I go in and repair. Quite often, as some of you who work here know, there's a work order system, and some of you may have put in work orders and said, hey, we've seen sparks come out of our outlets, and so we get in there, and that's usually what we find. very old wiring that sometimes is constant in and out has created problems. This one's a lack of well, that's a code violation. And quite frankly, it exists in probably many of the school classrooms in the building.
That's not a surge protector either, is it?
No,
So
no.
it has some sense
One
of
of the
equipment.
interesting, what you just stated, this strip here, there are two of them down in the reach area above the sink areas that are GFCI protected. However, these are not. The ones that I find in the classrooms typically aren't. So that was done in the past. We'd like to change that. We've got lighting issues too here. This particular room is still fluorescent. Back in, let's see. So in 1999, the district had an effort to change the old large fluorescence tubes to smaller ones for energy efficiency. Well, now we've gone to LEDs, and we could reduce the amount of power in this room probably down to a tenth of what's in here. But in some areas, this particular one has insulation above it. It just makes it difficult for us to get a contractor in, but we will do this room at some point in our budget. However, many of the classrooms have this type of lighting or pendant lighting hanging from the ceilings of which are hazardous. The ceiling tiles are made up of some asbestos components, while they're also glued on to the concrete decks above them with glue dabs that are known asbestos. Now, while I'm on that subject, I don't want you to get overly concerned at the moment. This is inspected every 6 months by a third-party company. And every 3 years, they come into the school and do a complete analysis of the school to determine if anything has been damaged or friable or anything needs to be repaired so that we can quickly take care of that. But the problem here is that we want to make additional improvements in these schools to provide LED lighting, to provide better environments in our classrooms. These kind of things are preventing us from doing that. Not easily. In order to get that lighting changed effectively would be an abatement crew would come in and have to remove various hazards before an electrical crew could come in and move any of the lighting. So that's prevalent throughout the entire district. Okay. Well, I said before that there are many rooms missing cooling resources, and I detail them in my sheet here. When it comes to site and structural, this particular school doesn't have a fenced boundary, but it serves as a public park also. And as a result of that, the traffic pattern out in our driveway as many of you know, shares as a student drop-off and a access to a local park. I'm not going to speak about that very much. I don't know what to say. The point is, they should be separate. Many of our classrooms have vulnerability to vehicular traffic because they're low to the ground with lots of windows that are accessible also. I don't have any pictures of that, but you're probably all familiar with them. Out on the school exteriors, the staircases. This particular one is the canopy. Now, I've tried to find drawings of this canopy because I have no clue if this is a big, large chunk of concrete or if it's a big void full of soil underneath of it. So in order to, I'm gonna have to drill holes in there to try to find out what the composition is, or just turn around and leave it to a contractor to come up with a proposal. That's a big job. What I've been doing is I end up to be like a dentist with staircases around here. I keep going in and making little repairs and little repairs and little repairs, and they're adding up. The front stairs here, I've probably got $6,000 into them over 15 years, and 10,000 into the ones on the side over here, just by having to go in a little at a time. And it isn't anything that we're doing wrong. It's just that the water has gotten into the concrete over the many years of it sitting there, and it expands the rebar, and the rebar is a rod inside that is of steel construction that holds the stairs together, but it expands it. When it expands it, the concrete has nowhere to go and it breaks. So we end up to be like dentists, and we end up having to go in there and make repairs. Servicing those stairs are many rails, steel rails. Those rails all go into the ground. Now, these repairs are beyond our normal maintenance issues. In order to fix these kind of issues, you know, this takes the replacement of the concrete, the replacement of the rails. This is a much bigger job than we can handle as a maintenance department. But it's starting to occur throughout the district. Many of the sidewalks are spalled, which is just nothing more than pieces, chunks missing out of them as a result of a lot of ice melt through the years, where water, ice melt starts to degrade the concrete, water gets in and now freezes and it starts to break it apart. These become dangerous after a while. Many of them are cracked. These are areas that we need to rip up and replace.
Yeah, and I mean, certainly it's cosmetic, but they're also trip and fall hazards, particularly for people coming, if they're wearing high heels and get stuck in these kinds of things, like, you know, that can be a significant
Absolutely.
issue, and even a potential lawsuit if they're injured in a slip and fall case.
Now, the building itself, in terms of its bricks, well, this particular building is brick. In terms of its brick exterior, in this particular instance, the gymnasium has, at each of its four corners, if you notice this water issue, if you look really close, you'll see the bricks are damaged there. That issue has been coming up in architectural reports for the last 20 years. None of the architects even know or have made a solution or made a suggestion as to how to repair it or what it's coming from. Luckily, it's just surface at the moment, but it's something that we really should get in and take a look at. Okay, here's this is a picture of the crawl spaces, which you got a little bit of a view in when you're looking at the septic systems. These are the conditions of this crawl spaces. They're very dusty, and like I said, many years of water infiltration. I would be lying if I told you there couldn't be mold in there. You know, I can't smell much of anything, but many people who do seem to smell mold. There is no visible, there's nothing like growing anywhere. You can say, oh, there's mold, but you can smell it. It's probably in the dirt downstairs.
And if you were to shine a flashlight,
And I showed that at one
see,
point.
yeah,
right?
particulate in the air, so, you know, it's dangerous for people to work down there to do repair work,
Right.
you know.
Well, interestingly enough, Mark is right. You know, we as a facility department and a maintenance department, we're in these spaces all the time. We're working in these spaces, and we protect. I brought Ben in there, and he wore a respirator down there the whole time. Well, I did too. But, there's a couple more pictures of. Oh, now I've been told I shouldn't show this particular picture, but underneath the gymnasium there is the remnants of a gun range. It has been inactive for many years. There's never been a shot fired since I've been here for 15, but it hasn't been cleaned either. You know, it's got a soiled floor, and if you notice the watermarks, see the high watermarks on the
Don't they call those multi-purpose rooms now?
That brings a whole different way to bringing a gun to school. I could only picture these students way back, leaning against the rifle, waiting for the bus. I'm like, wow, I can't even fathom that, but you can see it was active at one time, both for people laying down and standing up. This is remnants of the high water that had been in there for many years. And it has been dry for the 15 years I've been here. Or since 2013. Notice the remnants of the pipe that I told you had been pumping water out and letting water back in. So that range that has a dirt floor, and that dirt floor, this is a picture of that dirt floor. There's remnants of casings and debris from shootings. Interestingly enough, I don't want to. The state has 2 years ago they sent a questionnaire out to all schools. Do you have a shooting range under your schools? And many schools apparently did at one time, and this was one of them. No big issue, but the fact is, the question was it environmentally clean? I don't think so.
And we have staff that their offices are open air to that area.
That is correct. So our maintenance department, they are sitting within feet of that downstairs. That is
Without a
correct.
door, without a door.
That is correct. There are no doors. They're in that space. Yes, right. And then there's a picture of other hazards that are down there too. But I don't show that because of maintenance. It's
Right.
just a fact that's where we are. Yes, right. So we go on to our architectural discussion and our aesthetics, and we talk about the carpets. Many of you probably have been throughout the entire district and recognize this pattern everywhere. Well, it's the best I could figure. It's around 1990-ish, somewhere in there. One of the problems with us changing this carpet in many of these schools is that it was put over asbestos tile that is glued down, not only asbestos tile, but glued down with an asbestos mastic. So in order to change this carpet, it would take an abatement project. I would have to have, I just can't come up and pull it up because it'll pull up tiles and other debris that we can't legally handle.
Don, can you just explain a little bit about what you say an abatement project?
Well-
What does that entail?
So, okay, interesting question. Back last summer, we did a window project at the high school. And if you remember, we had to keep all humans under 18 years old off the site for the entire time that we exposed a hazard like asbestos. And what I mean by that is, in order to remove this, all the windows would be sealed, the doors would be sealed, this room would be sealed. There would be a fan put at one location and an exterior exhaust at another, where it would capture anything they would pressurize this room, and they would blow any of the hazards out the fan into filters and collect it outside, while workers in Tyvek suits, entirely encased, would come in here and remove the carpets and then remove the hazards. And when it comes down to the glue depths, like this is a concrete floor, so it's got glue, tile. They may be able to get the tile up with a bar or something, but now they've got to remove the glue from the concrete, and they literally will grind it off with a grinder. And this entire room will be dust. They will be enclosed, and sometimes breathing apparatus, and all that will be collected and brought off site and disposed of properly.
So the process is not only extreme, but also takes a long time.
That is correct, right?
It's expensive and.
And it's permitted.
And getting rid of the material is tough, right?
Right.
People usually don't want contaminated waste.
Right.
Don, isn't it true that you're not just disposing of the asbestos? Everything, the
Yes.
carpet, the
Yeah.
tiles, everything.
At
has
that
to be
point, it's
disposed
all
of
assumed to
as
be
hazardous
hazardous.
waste.
That's correct, right?
It all becomes hazardous waste.
That is correct, right?
And asbestos is a funny thing, right? And when we hear about it, we get nervous, right? And asbestos is okay if it's encapsulated and it's left untouched. It's when it becomes friable, which means if you were to hold your hands and like go like this, you would see the fibers kind of like floating down. That's when it's problematic, right? Because that's when you can breathe them into your lungs, that kind of thing. So right now it's okay, but any work in the school, so if we're talking about pipes, if we're talking about new carpeting, tile head that's chipped and cracked, any of those kinds of things now become abatement problems or abatement issues, and so those are the things that we start to run into. So when we say we've done all the easy stuff, we have, right? But now some of these other fixes are going to involve us having to infiltrate or go into walls and floors and ceilings where there may be some of these things, right? Whether that's asbestos or lead paint, and so those will have to do abatement projects to do that work.
A simple carpet change turns into an abatement
And
project.
also the lockers.
Right, well, interesting question, okay. We can chat about that. Emily, since she got here, has been asking for new lockers. These lockers were installed when this was a high school, and they're not they're not designed for kids this size.
They love them.
They do. Well, they could probably hide in there. I'm not sure.
They do.
And put whatever they want in there.
May or may not have seen that happen.
But part of the problem is we are replacing the lockers finally, but the problem is we have to replace them in kind. So in other words, we're gonna remove what the existing locker, the same configuration that it is, and put a new one in the same configuration that it was. And the reason for that is the walls have remnants of lead paint on the base material before it was, other paints were added. And many asbestos materials are in the floor tops, so we can't disturb all that. All we're gonna do is remove the lockers and put new lockers in. So we can't really improve them and put something that's more appealing and more useful for somebody of this particular age, yes, right. Those are the simple things we'd like to do to help improve the schools, yes, I'm sorry.
Is there any concern that with the removal of the old stuff that there's gonna be any sort of mold or anything behind the old walls?
We don't see any evidence of that,
Okay,
but
that's good.
to your point, it will be done when nobody's around.
Yeah.
The school will be closed and we will oversee it, and if we run into it, we have to stop.
Yeah.
So
Solution.
we're gonna do this, and we're
Cross
gonna
our
say,
fingers that there's
you know
not,
what, we think we'll be okay.
And the lockers are rusty, right? So there is, there has been some issues in this building with moisture. And if you talk to Emily, she'll tell you that even times that the floors get slippery because of, the collection of moisture during temperature changes and that type of thing. So, if we encounter mold, then we'll have to deal with it. But those are the unknowns, right? And that's where, again, small projects become big projects pretty quickly when you're working in some of these old spaces.
We're trying to make an improvement, simple improvement of changing a locker, and if we run into anything, we may end up stopping and leaving it that way until summer, and we can get back at it.
Yeah.
When we can do something with an abatement. Many of the floor tiles, let's see, where are we? Okay, so many of our floor tiles, and this is redundant because it's everywhere. And I'm just showing you the fact that it is everywhere. This is in the main hallway, the front door being here, and this is one of the boys' restroom. So this tile it's identified as asbestos along with the glue that's holding it down. Many of the grout materials in this ceramic tile is also asbestos. This plaster wall here has remnants of lead below it, and the plaster's not asbestos. We've tested it around the school, and it's not. However, the glues that may be holding these base moldings are, and the grout that's between them are. So a simple let's improve the bathroom and change the tile is, well, no, we can't do that. We can, but it's a much bigger issue, and it's just one bathroom. Now to the districts, they through the years in our program, our asbestos program, there is evidence that the district has been removing asbestos through the years. They have removed great amounts of it through the years, and they've spent a lot of money to do it, and it's witnessed in the documentation. in each of these schools, you'll see a book in the front of each of these schools that has all the documentation as to what's in here, what's asbestos containing, what's been removed, and when. So they have been trying to remove it. However, it's just everywhere. This is the hallway, you're probably familiar with. This is called Tectum. It's a sealing material, and it's not an asbestos containing material. It's a woven fiber, more like a heavy fiberglass. But there's a couple of issues here. One, the lighting is old, and I've been trying to change the lighting to LED. I can't get above this ceiling at all. Quite frankly, we can't even find out, and all the drawings don't even show the detail of what's holding it. So it tends to sag from side to side. We've attempted to find structure so we could reapply it, but we haven't. So a lot of what you see here, we run a lot of our wiring on the plaster walls because we can't get above these ceilings. And quite frankly, if I had my way, I'd put a drop ceiling here, but I would only be covering up another issue. I'd put a drop ceiling here so that we could run our wiring and get to change these lights. But that's a simple lighting improvement that we'd like to do, but it turns out we could probably overcome that if we had a contractor remove them, and let's see what we can do. But it's difficult to do that in a school environment and say to Nicole, okay, I'm not sure how much money I'm gonna spend, and we're gonna try to pull that down and see what we got. It's one of those kind of
The
things.
drop ceiling, especially in this type of design, it would almost make that feel like a tunnel. It'd be very
Yeah.
claustrophobic, I think, too. So it's, probably not the best for that type of application.
No. So we get into our restrooms, and now I'm sure many of you have been in there, and we talk about our fixtures. Again.
Now, is there a bathroom upstairs on the second floor?
Yes, there is. It's a single. Well, there's three. There's a gang girls, a gang boys, and a single restroom. But I'm sorry. That's a term that the custodians use all the time. the gang restroom. Right? Yes, there are three out there. Downstairs here, the only restrooms are in the main hallway down here.
Well, and in the region.
And then the reach.
Yeah. This is a heating, it's hiding a heating element that's an old cast iron radiator, remnants of steam, but we're using it for hot water right now. And, the same thing with the fixtures. Notice in many of these pictures, we haven't focused on our ADA compliance. So the American Disabilities Act, access for people who are disabled in wheelchairs and other disabilities. We haven't protected our equipment properly for those people. There isn't enough room there is here, but not enough to gain access. If you notice that there isn't a picture here of the two restroom devices, but there's not enough room in there to and this particular building does have one handicapped accessible toilet in the front main hallway, but it's just one. And while we're on the subject, there's very, very few ways for access in and out of a lot of rooms in the school or even the school itself.
We don't have the type of facilities to do easily in these spaces, changing of diapers or that type of thing for not young children. It could be that for each, but also because of potty training. But like if a student had cerebral palsy, and they may have to be changed. It'd be nice to have like a changing table in there or specially designed toilets and things that are easier for some of our students who have mobility issues or other disabilities.
Now, to follow up on that, and some of you may know this, we do have such a facility, but it is one that we created for a single individual at the time. And it has a nurse's type bed in it, which is a fixed bed. To Mark's point, many of the more modern places to do that have devices that go to the floor that will lift a student or child up so that a nurse or whoever's helping to that child to change those diapers doesn't have to pick them up. There are many workplace injuries through schools, people picking up people to help them in that manner.
Yeah, and also that also becomes a staffing issue too, because you'll have people who will say, either I can't do that, or I don't wanna do that, or we have difficulty. If someone interviews for a job, you tell them that that's part of the job, especially if you have, a fifth grader who maybe, weighs 100 pounds, moving 100 pounds of unbalanced weight is really difficult. And so that's things that, become difficult for us to staff and keep people motivated to do that work.
So, we get to our windows. In this particular school, that's what prevented people before me from putting window air conditioners in here. Nobody tackled it. These particular windows, well, this room is a push out, but all the classrooms are Jollity. They're roll out windows where they go out this way. So it took removing a panel and putting in a blank panel to be able to install them. And it also took running power. So this particular issue, one year we ran all the power, and the next year we did the windows and put the units in for budgeting purposes. But my point about windows is they're in many cases they're large, they're heavy, they're inaccessible. They're not easily opened, even though they're new. This particular school, these windows were changed in the 80s. But the other two elementaries were changed in the 2013 timeframe. But they're very large windows that many of the teachers have a hard time opening.
And that is the fresh air intake for our systems, right? And
Right, exactly.
Emily would tell you that, one of the goals here at the school is to encourage our teachers to open the windows for about 10 minutes out of every hour to allow for some of that fresh air exchange. But if they're difficult to open or hard to get at, that becomes more difficult to do.
Yeah. Over in the Burnham area, I do have some are located above, so the bottom windows are fixed and the top, the above them are opening, so people need a ladder to actually get in there and open. The doors in this school are they're good, they're solid, but they're old. And not only are the doors old, the hardware is old. This is a mortise on a door, Emhart. When I was a kid, that factory was in my town, and it burned down. But that's how old that mortise is. Now it works fine, but it's old. and hit the door one, and here's the strike on the other side. So that's its strike.
And we'll talk about safety at our next one of these, but having the strike engage, every time reliably is a huge piece of safety. And unfortunately, in some of the active shooter events around the country, that's been a point of failure in schools, is that the door was closed, but the strike didn't, engage, whether that was an interior or exterior door. So, it's one of the things we'll talk about during the safety presentation, but just bear in mind that is kind of a twofold issue.
We spend, and Nicole attests to this, we spend quite a bit of district funds on locks and lock hardware and door issues, mostly because of their age. And we're basically trying to go in there and repair something that's really old, or, put a new component in one, and then the next, and the next, and the next, and the next. This is a shot of a typical classroom throughout our entire district. And what you're looking at is a blackboard affixed to the wall with an asbestos glue dab, and then a modern whiteboard on top of it. Now, this is one of my pet peeves. I can't stand this, but I'm stuck with it. I can't do anything about it without an abatement project to get that blackboard off of there and clean that wall.
So when we got these, I did ask Don, I said, Don, why don't you take this down? It looks terrible. And he said, I don't disagree, but I can because there's this abatement thing. And so, I had to say, okay, I hear what you're saying. So maybe we can patch these holes, make it look a little nicer. But
We did.
But that was the thing, and that's why you'll see those around the district installed that way, and sometimes you'll see a chalkboard with a whiteboard with a LED projector over that, so it's like, you know, 3 layers of technology,
Years.
these glacial layers.
It's good for the kids to be district.
Yes.
I don't have a picture of the flat roofs, but most of our schools in the district have flat roofs. And this particular building behind us, this one's a single story, this one's a 2-story. This one is a 1988 roof up above here. Not that there's anything at the moment wrong with it, because what I do is I have it scanned every few years and I just patch what parts need to be repaired. So there's a few $100,000 roof replacement up there that really needs to be done, and all I'm doing is keeping that away from us at the moment by fixing the areas that are suspect. It's pretty good at the moment. Every now and then we get a leak here and there, and we go up and fix it. But we need to take care of it. This is a typical data closet in this particular school, and each of them are like this. This one's a little unique. It's in the center of an area where we can't get any cooling in there. The other two, well, I'm sorry, one of the other two is near an outside wall. We actually put an air conditioner in the block wall into a closet that is cooling our data. And you know, when you think about this, it started off with one computer and one wire at some point and one piece of equipment, and somebody thought that was a good place to put it, and then the next one came, and the next wire, and the next wire, and there you go. That's in the school's supply closet.
So certainly you get the spaghetti junction here of wires, right? So this could be a little cleaner, I think, but then the cooling is the big piece, right?
Yes,
And,
right.
and
The door's open all the time.
Mhm.
yeah, new build outs of these things have very specialized rooms that they build that are climate controlled.
And one of the problems with that being open all the time is the dust that gets into all those pieces of equipment. You know, a room that was sealed and properly cooled and had a proper environment wouldn't have that issue. And it's true, and I suspect Patrick would attest to that. It's got a lot of dust in our computer equipment.
Don, is heat a factor in the life expectancy of that equipment?
I would guess the answer is yes, but I'm not an expert at that. Yeah. Absolutely. I'm going to say that the conditions of the environment, whether they be heat, I'm thinking more dust, but I suspect the heat would also help degrade that equipment quicker. Yeah. Now we come to a point where we're just going to talk about the hazards, which we've been talking about all the way through. And you know, there's no need for me to go back all through this. We could show one shot, but we're talking about asbestos floors. This is the STEM lab upstairs, and this was an attempt to cover up what was an asbestos tile floor below it, and they wanted to create a STEM room. So I am guilty. I went down to Lumber Liquidators and bought this flooring and put it up there to cover up that room because they wanted it in 2 months' time or whatever. And I am guilty of putting that up there, but it was the only way to get them up there into a room that they can use. And those pictures are much more the same. And I've told you all along what's in all of this stuff. The next hazard would be the lead paint products, which I've also talked about. Underneath most of our surfaces, because our buildings were built in the 30s, in the 40s, there's lead paint underneath most of them. And many of the rooms have paint over paint over paint. And what we find is the EPA has a paint, patch, and repair program. Basically, it's we as a school district or a school cannot go into a classroom and sand or scrape any more than 6 square feet within any one room. And we cannot sand or scrape more than 20 square feet on an exterior. So we can't come in here and make improvements to these walls and attempt to make them more pleasing in aesthetics, because we can't do anything other than clean them and paint them again.
And this is a shot of that crawl space, again,
Yes.
with a light showing, the airborne dust that,
Right.
is in the air when, our folks are trying to work down in that space.
Yeah, I said to Ben, I said, look at this, take a picture of that. That's just from us crawling around, and we disturbed a little bit of that. And we talked about the lead and copper in our buildings, and the need, EPA is looking, okay, so by, let's see, what date is it? So by, I've got to, where's my EPA?
January, October
Yeah.
16, 2024.
Yes. What we're talking about here is we need, every public water system needs to be under the threshold of lead. Now, the EPA states, and this is true, that no amount of lead in our drinking water is safe, none. They're aware, though, that many systems have soldered joints, lead piping. I haven't found any lead piping in our systems at all. I have found a lot of soldered joints. There is a threshold, so it is not zero, but it's a very parts per million, and I don't know the number, but we are always under it. The fact of the matter is, the EPA is demanding that all public water supplies supplying schools create an inventory of their entire system components in an effort to eventually get to the point where they end up knowing what's there and ask for it to be, or demand for it to be removed. So one of the things on the horizon is I've got to do an inventory of our complete water systems here in every one of the schools to identify what components are supplying our water. Now, we do have quarterly water testing and we do have annual water testing, and we are under all of the states and the federal guidelines. However, like I said, zero is the goal. Zero.
And so Don, if we were to get to that, what would those plumbing systems look like? Would it be PVC and like that PEX tubing, that kind of stuff?
It would probably be a composite material, yes. The answer is yes. Brass fixtures, copper fixtures, brass fixtures and bronze fixtures also carry lead. So they want fixtures removed, they want piping removed that has lead solder, they want lead piping removed. And it's prevalent throughout the entire country. I was on a phone call with municipalities this past August throughout the entire country. And I was listening to people like in Phoenix, in Austin, in Boston, engineers talk about, what are you, crazy? We have to inventory the entire system? And now imagine that. We've got a couple of little schools that have a little well here, and we're supplying our own water. We can handle this, but this is throughout the entire country. And these big cities are gonna have to identify every component in their system and eventually remove and replace things.
So
The other thing I haven't talked about, I'm sorry, is the HVAC system, the state of Connecticut. The state of Connecticut has put in requirements for us to assess our HVAC systems. The first requirement is to assess them by January 1st, 2025. And by assess, we need to identify the existing components, whether they're working to their capacities, what repairs they may need to make. And it's in an effort to eventually put restrictions on temperature and humidity controls. So down the line, it's moving towards, well, this isn't good enough. We need to put in fresh air exchange. We need to keep temperature control, possibly humidity. They keep pulling that word in and out. I'm putting an RFP together. Nicole and I are talking about this now to create that assessment so that we do have it in preparation for January 1st, 2025.
Sorry, let me ask something before we move on. Maybe it was outside of the
I'm
scope
done.
of the presentation, but I noticed we didn't talk about the kitchens. Is that outside of the scope?
The reason, okay, so I was trying to focus on the facility itself, but you're not wrong. Each of the buildings has a kitchen, none of which produce a meal for the schools. None of them comply in terms of code, if that's what you're asking.
Like our
And-
kitchen here doesn't have like a stove or, you know, the equipment to even cook and prepare food, right?
Right.
And so I did ask Ben to go take some shots of the kitchen. I didn't include it in this presentation, but we can deal with that in one of the few upcoming ones maybe.
Okay.
Because I think it would be important, and it would be a dream of mine to be able to serve nutritious hot lunch, right? I love to cook, and that's one of the things that, you know, I think is great for kids, is to be able to have access to nutritious lunches here at school rather than things that are, you know, largely prepared and or processed foods that we're just rewarming. We do our best. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, they really do try hard to and get creative with these things. But you know, I think that would be a wonderful opportunity. And I think if we show the pictures of our kitchen, and particularly it's the restroom off the kitchen, like those are spaces that really need some serious reinvestment and refreshing. You know, to bring us up to code and up to a usable level that we could actually use it as a commercial kitchen.
So the scope of this
Technically,
is
it's not a kitchen.
No,
I mean, it's not a kitchen.
no, the
Yeah.
answer is no.
Right now, it's more like a pantry, right? Like it's just
Right,
it's a room.
it's a storage.
It's
Yeah,
a
right.
room,
Yeah,
yes, right,
it's not a
storage,
kitchen.
yes, I'm sorry.
So just to clarify, the scope of this was to highlight kind of the exposed and potentially hazardous areas. We're not focusing on the kitchen.
My
It's not
scope is
creating
trying to
hazard.
identify the fact that we can't move much further ahead with either the aesthetics or the mechanical heating, air, water, without removing the hazards that are in the way. And that's why I
And that would
left the
include the
kitchen.
kitchen.
I was gonna say,
Well,
I imagine the
the-
kitchen is part of that.
Sure.
It
Not
is,
being
and
hazardous.
and I
Or we
will,
can
I will
add
add
it,
it, but I didn't want this to be about that. I wanted it to be
Right.
about the building, the components in the building, not specific spaces, you know,
Right.
so.
You know, and you'll also notice when we talk about like a kitchen, you know, it makes me think about fire suppression, which you would see in the kitchen too. You'll notice we don't have sprinkler heads, you know, here or at any of our elementary buildings. So, you know, again, that would be best practice, you know, in fire protection, is to have suppression, you know, right in the buildings. But that's something that we don't have at this point. To put it in, we would have to again do a remediation project because we'd be going into the ceiling.
Absolutely true.
Thanks.
Any other questions on that?
This may also be outside of what this meeting tonight's about, but all of these buildings are owned by the individual towns, right? But then the
That's
board,
for the elementaries. That's true. Yes.
But we renovate the schools.
Right.
It comes out of our school budget.
Right,
So
no,
it
I
doesn't come out
understand.
of town. Oh, just
Thank you.
thank you.
that was my question, right? The buildings are technically owned, so
Right.
if at some point we decided to not use any of the buildings, the building reverts back to the town.
Correct.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to improve them more than we have so far. And right now, we're on the edge of having to make some big decisions about what that's gonna look like and how we're gonna accomplish that.
And we hope that this helped to educate, you know, the public and the community on some of the needs that you don't necessarily see when you come in and take in a lot of the amazing things that happen here at school. But we also want to make this a two-way conversation. We want to hear and learn from you. What are the things that either you're thinking about that you would like to see, that you have concerns about, so that we're able to make good decisions moving forward, hearing from you. So, you know, we're asking you to educate us in return as well.
To do an abatement, how much time would it take to get rid of it all and how much money?
Good question. I suspect in order to keep the school moving, it would have to be done in pieces if we were gonna occupy it every year for classroom use. And how many pieces would be a good question. If it's probably a good dozen or so, which would mean.
12 years worth.
Yeah, right.
Well,
Yeah.
to put it in perspective, we have abated some asbestos recently, like up at Chippewa. Like,
Correct.
is there like do we wanna give ballpark figures of what those cost? I mean, I know it's different when you extrapolate and the project becomes bigger,
It
but
was
it's not
different.
inexpensive.
It's not
Right, just to
inexpensive,
put it
no. It was different in nature. It was exterior tectum panel. So it was a cementatious board that's about an inch thick and in pieces like that. They were removed in whole. You know, this kind of abatement is like I discussed. This is an intrusive abatement that is time consuming. I don't know the answer. It'd be very difficult for me. I wouldn't even want to throw out a number. But in pieces, it would take a long time. Not easy.
Well,
Not
and it's,
easy.
again, like in times three, right, because you're talking
Yeah.
about 3 schools and, you know,
Right.
and not to mention the other things that need to be repaired and replaced on top of that.
Well, each of the areas that would be abated would be renovated or
Right.
replace the carpets, the
Yeah.
wall
Right.
tile, lighting, etc. once you were done. So that's what I mean by the little pieces, you know, because you only have a couple of months during the summer to do it.
And, you know, many of these things we pointed out, these are the tougher to accomplish, you know, repairs, they're costly, but they're also the ones that, if they spring up on us unexpectedly, right? Like we had a backup in a pipe at Chippewa that kind of caught us by surprise, and just that's a difficult fix. But if one of these things happens, we could be looking at closing school, you know, for a significant period of time and having to move students to other locations to carry on educational activities. You know, and so that's why it's important for us to get out ahead of these things before they fail, right? It's a gamble if we say, oh, well, we'll just let it roll and see what happens and fix it, you know, when it finally fails. You know, it could be a major inconvenience or it could be catastrophic. So those are the things we're really trying to think about as we look ahead and think about where we want to make investments strategically to get at these problems that we're articulating here. Greg, did you have your hand up?
Oh, no, I was just gonna mention that, you know, exactly what you just said, right? You have components in these buildings that are old. For example, the electric switchgear over at Boothbury School in Roxbury dates back to 1930. If that part fails, it's 30 weeks to replace it. That means you have to close school for the better part of a year because you have no electricity. And so when you get to this stage, what we're trying to figure out is, because we now have all the big pieces, we picked the low-hanging fruit, we now have to figure out what are the problems and how do you have to approach it? Because it's going to be a major investment to solve some of these problems because they're old. All this material is old and it's expensive and it's large. You know, so that's sort of where we are, and we didn't want to. We don't want to wait until it fails to address it. We want to address it, figure out what our long-term plan is now. We have outstanding schools. I want to make sure we have outstanding schools in 10 years, and 20 years, and 30 years. And that's the way you do it. You address these big problems because that's where we are now.
You know, the other side is there's a synergistic effect, right? So many of these systems work in tandem. And so it's not easy just to do one thing without doing the other, right? So if we're replacing, let's say, pumping systems, well, that's electrical and it's plumbing, right? When we had some power interruptions this year, I said to Don, why don't we have generators? And he said, well, because some of our buildings, you know, we don't have the capacity to have a generator. And so that sets off a whole nother project, which then begets another project if there's an abatement one attached to that. So, you know, these are the kinds of, you know, things we're running into here. And so some of these things will make sense to do them together because you'll have a system that's built together, that works together, maybe the same way that, you know, we find that, hey, sometimes it works great when our software and computers are built together, they work nicely, right? Or our cell phones. A lot of our systems like that, especially the ones today, they're very complex, right? And so when you can kind of build these things in tandem, it's nice.
And I can't help but think too, Don, when you were saying that putting that camera into that pipe and kind of afraid of what you're most afraid to know what's going to happen, right? It's that because it's, you know, it's like if you give a mouse a cookie and the next thing you know, you're down a long road, and so sometimes ignorance truly is bliss because it's not rope.
No, I have a pretty good idea what I'm going to find. I don't want to see it.
Exactly.
and quite frankly, it's the beginning of, well, now what do we do? You know,
Yeah.
how far do we go? Right? There's thousands of feet of it.
So if you shut down a school in sections to take care of some of these problems with a piece of property like 30 acres, are you able to then put trailers on the property where you can just kind of put those classrooms or put those libraries into these trailers and still keep the school community together?
That is one solution. We have to look at everything, but the answer is probably yes. I don't know how the state feels about this particular location because of that river. This is a floodplain,
Right.
and I, be honest with you, I don't even know if they'd let us build a school here again. You know, I'm not entirely positive, but a trailer is a temporary solution that
Right.
could be workable at times. But a lot of things need to go into, can we do that?
Right.
You know.
And it depends on what school too, I would think
Correct,
that
right,
for
right.
maybe a smaller school than even Washington Primary School, and I think Booth for a long time had trailers. And do they
Well,
don't
there's still
anymore.
a,
They still do.
They have one.
They have one, but I think that if you're dealing with a half of the school, and you're dealing with 3 or 4 different classrooms or grades, I think that gets a little complicated.
Yeah, that's a good question though too, because, you know, many of these projects are also gonna be slow moving, right?
Yeah.
You gotta build up the finances for this and get the approvals, you know, and the permitting and all that, so, nothing in government, nothing in schools works fast, and so, that's just another thing to keep in mind too, right? So, you know, when we start to think about what do we need to do, all solutions will be on the table, and we're gonna have to think about, you know, what are the timeframes and what makes sense. But for some of our kids, you know, if we were to start this right now, their entire careers in the district will be touching this in some way, shape, or form. If we're lucky, I mean, it could also go a lot slower, right? This could be a 20-year project, so, you know, that's where, there's a sense of urgency that we have to start addressing this because these things aren't into their life, but also because if we don't get started, we're gonna be sitting here, you know, decades from now having the same conversation or even a worse one saying, I can't believe that, you know, we had that massive flood and now we can't use that part of the building or wherever it might be.
Well, I was just gonna say, I mean, the trailer idea would work in theory for the renovations to actually take place, but for the abatement,
I was gonna
Don
say,
said you can't have anybody under the age of 18 on the
Correct,
property.
on
So
the
like
property,
the
right.
abatement would have to be done
Right.
without the kids here.
On the property or in the building?
On the property.
I would say, yeah, within a school.
Now, that's an interesting question.
Well, yeah.
The answer to your question is on the property. The interesting part is the town owns this entire
Well,
property.
yeah.
School leases a portion of it. I don't know if,
Right, what would they
Yeah, like
consider
would the town
property?
not be able to utilize
Right.
the park while
that's a
abatement
good
was
question on
happening?
this property.
Right.
'Cause
Oh, gosh.
weren't there any, there was no activities at Chapagua?
No one under 18 was
During the
allowed at
summer.
Chapag during the summer.
I can attest, I
Right.
tried like heck to try to get programs going up there this past summer.
And that was minimally disruptive. I mean, I know
Correct.
that Jen and I, like, you know, tried to work the best we could around some of that stuff, but, you know, the other side of it is, you know, this school, for example, gets heavy use during the summer, so, you know, it is
Yeah.
disruptive to the entire
Yeah.
community. If we say, oh, we're gonna do abatement, you know, Jen's like, okay, well, now I can't run my basketball camp or the astronomy camp or all the
Park
other
and
things.
rec.
that I
Yeah,
just hope we do
summer
here.
school, all the-
Swim
Right.
team, all of that other stuff that happens. that we
Extended
get
school
into.
year for our special ed kids.
Alright,
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we talked a little bit about trailers, about using those for students, but because most of this property is in a floodplain, I don't think they're gonna let you put that type of device, that type
Yeah.
of building in a flood area, a flood prone area. So you're gonna have to be very careful if you can do that, if you can put those at all on the site, where you put them is gonna be critical, because you just can't have the possibility of one of those getting carried away by floodwaters. Not that we usually have floods that big, but look, we've never had floods like we're having now. Over in Roxbury, we had some serious flooding from these last recent storms, so that's getting worse. And so that becomes a difficulty. But I mean, these are all things that we have to figure out and manage, and that's why we're trying to take a comprehensive look now. We're trying to get ahead of this.
So I have a loaded question, so I go back to the time of when we were trying to consolidate, and, you know, I guess my question becomes, what is the, you know, a solution, is it always going to be to repair, or do we have other things on the table, like, would, building new somewhere be
So-
more cost effective and?
And I think that, that makes a lot of sense to ask that question, but I think right now we're still in the educating and data gathering phase. I think solutions will be something we'll look at in the future. And I think when we get to that point, we're seriously gonna lean on some expertise, and I think we'll be looking at all kinds of solutions, right? But I think we're still a ways off from that. I think that right now we wanna say, let's educate everybody and do what we're doing tonight. Start talking about the problem, right? And I'm not trying to be dismissive of anything, but at the same time, I say that this is like one of those like grown-up problems where you have to kind of sit down as a family and say, these are grown-up problems. We need a grown-up conversation about what are going to be the solutions, right? And they're painful, right? It's going to have huge impacts on budgets. Like there's a lot of moving parts to this, and so that's what I think the board is hoping to learn from the communities is what do the communities want to do? What can we, then put forth as a plan that makes sense? That's minimally disruptive educationally, that's feasible, that serves all the things we want and gives us great educational spaces. I mean, you look at Chapag, beautiful campus, and now we say like we want to make sure that we're reinvesting in our elementary the same way that we're doing, for our secondary students. And so I think we're still not at the solution phase yet, but that will definitely be part of the conversation. We might be like a year out. We're going to take a year and kind of go through all these pieces, right? And we don't want to overwhelm people, so we're saying, all right, let's start small. We'll talk about the facilities. We'll talk about safety. We'll talk about teaching and learning and programming, which lunch will be part of the programming piece. Talk about enrichments, right? We have parents who are saying, hey, we would really love if we could do these other things too, right? And so we want to be able to get all of these kind of things out on the table and explore these and learn together before we start talking about, what do we do next? Patrick, did you have your hand up? Sorry, hand over here.
You must have just heard me thinking it. The scariest thing I heard was, we're out for 30 weeks if that electrical panel fails. And that's just one thing we're talking about in Don's massive list. What are the others that we're at risk in? What's the length of time we're at risk in? How are we going to triage it so you can prioritize it? And the chances that that panel goes out versus that pipe fails and so on. We're in panic mode and scrambling to react to something that we know is going to fail in the not too distant future.
Well, I wish I could answer that question more thoroughly as to what are all the big potential problems are, but we know that we have three elementary school buildings that belong to the towns, that don't belong to us. We lease them. And they're old. Some of them are very, very old. And we know that there are major components in them that are eventually going to go. Some of them have been upgraded to the point where they won't go, they're not in the danger of going like the 1930 thing is. I mean, who knows? That might go for another, 40, 50 years, but it might fry out tomorrow. We don't know. And so the idea is we're trying to identify these things. We're trying to figure out what in these buildings needs to be, what we need to do. What's our total plan? Do we need to rebuild? Do we need to replace? We don't know that. We're not anywhere near that decision. Now we're at the point of trying to figure out what are the problems. So I know it's going to be a little scary to think, how do you solve these? Don't jump to how do you solve them. You need to understand all the pieces, and we need to understand as a board all the pieces before we can even get to that, because it's a big deal. And we think this is a good comprehensive program that the superintendent has organized in order to educate everybody, because you need to look at all the pieces to decide what is your solution. And you need to understand what's in the buildings, the safety and security, how we teach, what are the programmatic things. You need to go through that process, because otherwise you're likely to run off in a direction that solves this problem, but doesn't solve two or three of the others. And so what you need to see them all. And then at the end of the day, you're going to be as educated as the board is. And then when we get to a decision-making process, when you decide how much you're willing to pay and what you're willing to do and what direction the board needs to go in, we're all on the same page. We all have the same level of understanding. We just felt it was irresponsible for the board to head off in a direction without educating everyone and without hearing from you. We felt that was the right way to do this, because we're talking about some great public schools. I mean, you have no idea. And we want to make sure we still have great public schools. And we have buildings that can support them for years. That's really the idea here.
But I will say, Patrick, you're right, that it is a huge concern, right? That we're worried about how do we fix those problems when they come up. And so that's why it's really important that we start these conversations now. And that we really have everybody in the know in each 3 towns what we're dealing with. We don't have time to waste. We have to be able to all learn what's going on so we can make an informed decision as a community.
And that's gonna keep Nicole and I up at night. It's like, what do we do if we have a disaster? We have to quickly, spend money in some of these places. Like, that's a difficult conversation, and causes us a lot of stress and anxiety, to be honest, in terms of trying to think about, how do we manage some of those things? Like, if that panel did go, like, where can we quickly grab money to do that? And, and that's a difficult thing. So, those are the things we're wrestling with on a daily basis. We're trying to be as open and transparent with our community as possible, right? We're bearing it all here, all the bumps and warts and ugly stuff. We showed you the pictures so that you can see for yourself, but we want to join you in saying, like, what's a community-based solution, in the best interest of our kids and our faculty and staff, right? Like, we talk about the kids, but also people work here, right? And they love to work here. It's a great place to work, and we want to maintain that for our people as well. And so that's why we're putting this session together. Nicole, I don't know financially if you have any wizardry that you can pull off, but I know that we've had some
Where's your magic wand?
some discussions where it is terrifying. I mean, we've scratched our heads and we said, like, we need to maybe engage the board in some type of discussion around some type of. And the thing that's hard that people probably don't understand, especially with the regional school district, we have no rainy day fund. We can't just sock money away in the fund balance. In other states you can, even in Connecticut and other organizations you can. But we can't do that, right? So the towns actually can do that. So every year when we underspend and we give money back to the towns, they can sit that, in the bank and earn interest or use that when they have an emergency. We don't have that luxury. So every dollar in our budget has a job. And so, that's one of the things that, we've been really trying to figure out, how can we creatively come up with a way that we're protected, should something like this happen. And there's different thresholds where different plans might kick into place. Some of this will be insurance stuff, but then other things aren't, right? And even insurance, you wanna go to that well so many times too.
Well, we are able to put away just a little bit. We used to be 1%, now it's
Right.
2% of the budget can be in a non-recurring capital fund. And that fund is up there pretty well, Nicole. I think we're funded now close to $2 million, if I'm not mistaken. Look, there's no regional school district in the state that's gonna get money cheaper than us. We have the highest credit rating as possible to have for a district that has no taxing power. We have a AA+ credit rating. So we have a very high credit rating. We are extremely well financially managed district. So we have the ability to do these things. We just wanna make sure we make the right choice. That's really what we're trying to do. And yeah, we are worried about those kind of things, but that's why we're paying attention to it now, before they fail. I mean, the work we did up at Chapag, the money we spent on that agri-science and science lab, plus other money that's been spent, has bought us a lot of time up there. That's the newest building in our district, and it was built in 1970. It's 52 years old. And so we bought some time up there, and we've done a lot of good things up there. And parts of that building are now brand new and very energy efficient. So, we're working on it.
And don't misunderstand it. I mean, our kids are safe, right? These materials are
They are.
routinely inspected. Our water is inspected, the asbestos is inspected. But projects are going to, cause us to have to do some work around those areas. Also, no matter what we do moving forward, we're not going to just say to the kids that are here, oh, well, kind of stinks that you guys were here during that, that phase. I know it's icky, but, we have to do what we have to do. We're gonna still invest in the kids and invest in things. So, I've told Emily, yes, we'll put lockers in here because these projects are years away. So if our kids get even, 5-10 years of beautiful lockers and not rusted out, it's worth it, right? So, we're not giving up on the kids that are here just so that we can, look to make things better in the future. We're, kind of seeing this project and problem with 2 sets of eyes. The eyes looking at today and tomorrow, and then that, longer range set of eyes too. I just don't want people to think that, we're, we're never gonna just let our buildings go to pot just so that we can say that now look at, they're so terrible, now we have to do something. Like, we're still gonna fix the things that are broken, we're still gonna invest in the buildings, because that still makes sense in the near term, but we still, that doesn't get us away from some of these long-term big issues that we're facing.
So awareness is the first step. If everybody becomes more aware, we get the ball rolling, at least get behind it, and then we pick up momentum as we go. But like everybody was saying, I was listening, I'm like, wow, this is awesome. Because when everybody gets their brain, it must be nuts when you two sat down going, we can't do this alone. My thought would have been, hey, I gotta get some buddies. You know? So I think you're doing exactly the right thing.
Thank you, Tom. All right, I don't see any other questions, so, thank you guys for coming out tonight. I hope you learned some new things. We have other community forums coming up, so if you wanna, come together and talk about safety and security, I'm sure that'll be a popular one for folks. We'll see that's gonna be in January, so just look ahead of that, and we'll send out reminders and schedules ahead of time.